Hey family, welcome back to Black Queen Revenge. We've got a unique story for you today, full of emotion and real-life drama. If you love these stories, please like, comment, subscribe, and share your ideas for future videos. So, let's begin. The bitter December wind howled around the corners of the Gary apartment building, a mournful sound that seemed to seep through the very bricks. Inside, the silence was heavier, more oppressive. Nara stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in lukewarm dishwater, watching the suds dissolve around a plate she'd already scrubbed 3 times. The only light came from the living room, where the blue glow of the television played over the intent face of her 10-year-old stepson, Oluwa, as he watched a cartoon. He was curled under the blanket she'd knitted, a patchwork of blues and greens that was too big for him when she'd started it 3 years ago. Now it just covered his toes. From the bedroom down the hall, she could hear the low, urgent murmur of her husband's voice. Caitlin had been in there for over an hour, the door firmly shut. It was the 3rd time this week. Each call was longer, each whisper more secretive. A cold knot, familiar and dread-filled, had taken up permanent residence in Nara's stomach. It was the same feeling she'd had 6 years ago, standing in a different kitchen, listening to her father's labored breathing from the other room in the days before the cancer took him, a premonition of loss. She heard the bedroom door click open. Footsteps, deliberate and weighted, approached down the short hallway. Kalen appeared in the kitchen doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the light. He didn't look at her at first, his gaze sweeping over the modest kitchen, the chipped formica counters, the aging appliances, the small table where they'd shared thousands of meals. His eyes finally settled on her, and in them, she saw a resolve that turned the knot in her stomach to ice. "We need to talk," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. Nara slowly pulled her hands from the water, drying them on a dish towel that had long since lost its softness. She didn't speak, just waited. Experience had taught her that whatever Kaylin had rehearsed in that bedroom would come out regardless of anything she might say. He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "I've been talking to Zamara." The name hung in the air between them, a ghost made tangible. Zamara. Oluwa's biological mother, the woman who had left a 2-year-old boy with nothing but a note on the refrigerator and a void filled with questions. The woman whose parental rights had been legally terminated 3 years prior. A ghost Kaylin had sworn was forever buried. "She's changed," Kaylin continued, his eyes watching Nara for a reaction. "She's grown up. She realizes what she lost." Nara found her voice, though it sounded thin and far away to her own ears. "What does that have to do with us?" "She wants a chance to fix things with her son." He emphasized the pronoun, her son. "He's rented a cabin up in Michigan, a nice place near a ski hill, for New Year's. She wants us, me and Oluwa, to spend the holidays with her, as a family." The words were so absurd, so cruelly delivered, that for a moment she might laugh. Instead, a strange detachment settled over her. She watched as if from a distance as her own hand smoothed the dish towel on the counter. "You and Oluwa and Zamara for New Year's." "Yes." Kaylin's jaw tightened. "He needs his real mother, Nara, not a stepmother. You've been adequate, but blood is blood. She's ready to go back to court to get her rights restored, and I'm going to support her." Adequate? The word was a scalpel, precise and merciless. 6 years of nighttime fevers and morning school runs, of homework help and heart-to-heart talks, of being the only constant mother figure in a little boy's life, reduced to adequate. And where does that leave me? The question was automatic, a formality. She already knew the answer. Kaylin shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that erased every sacrifice, every moment of love. "If you don't like it," he said, his voice dropping to a cold, even tone, "you should file for divorce. I'm not holding you back." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint laughter from the television in the other room. Nara looked past him, through the kitchen doorway to where Oluwa's small silhouette was silhouetted against the TV's glow. Her son. in every way that mattered. She thought of the jade dragon she'd seen in a shop window months ago, the one she'd been saving to buy him for Christmas, a protector. She felt no protection now, only a vast, yawning exposure. She didn't argue, she didn't cry, she simply nodded, a slow, deliberate moment. I see. A flicker of surprise crossed Kalen's face, quickly replaced with satisfaction. He expected tears, pleading, a scene. Her calm acquiescence was even better. It confirmed his belief in her powerlessness. Good, he said, pushing off the doorframe. I'll let Zamara know it's settled. He walked back to the bedroom, already pulling his phone out of his pocket. Nara stood in the dim kitchen for a long time, listening to the wind. Then, methodically, she finished drying the plate, put it away in the cupboard, and hung the towel to dry. She walked into the living room and sat on the couch beside Oluwa, his little body warm and trusting. "Mama, why is Daddy talking on the phone so much?" he asked, his eyes still on the screen. "Grown-up stuff, baby," she whispered, kissing the top of his head, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, the children's kind he still preferred. She held him until the cartoon ended and his breathing deepened into sleep. Then she carried him to his room, tucked the dinosaur print comforter around him, and brushed a curl from his forehead. "Sleep tight, my son," she murmured. Back in the living room, she powered up the old desktop computer, the fan whirred in protest, the screen flickering to life. For 3 years, an email had sat in her inbox, a quiet, persistent possibility. An offer from a joint venture partner in Shenzhen, China, a consulting engineer position, a significant promotion, a life utterly different from the one she had in Gary. She had declined it 3 times. "Good women don't do that," Kalen had said. "Olawa won't survive the separation. You'd abandon your family." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She glanced down the dark hallway towards the bedroom where she could now hear the faint, triumphant sound of Kalen's laughter through the door. He was probably already telling Zamara the good news. She's not a problem. She'll do what she's told. Nara's fingers began to move, tapping out a reply with a steady, deliberate rhythm. "Dear Mr. Wang, thank you for your continued patience. I am now ready to accept the consulting position. I can commence after the New Year holidays." The click of the send button was a soft, final sound in the quiet apartment. It was the sound of a door closing, of a bridge burning. It was the sound of a woman who had just been told she was adequate, deciding to become something far more formidable. The next morning, the world was a monochrome painting of gray sky and white snow. Gary woke up sluggish and cold. At 5 a.m., the streetlights cast long, dancing shadows over snowdrifts left by the overnight blizzard as Nyara walked to the Gary Works steel mill. The air bit at her exposed skin, a sharp contrast to the heavy, metallic warmth that awaited inside. At the security gate, Miss Hattie, the guard who had seen generations of mill workers come and go, looked up from her crochet. "Nyara, girl," she said, her voice a low rasp. "Why you look like you're carrying the weight of the world this morning?" "Just tired, Miss Hattie," Nyara replied, tapping her badge. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The truth was a coiled spring inside her, a mixture of grief and a terrifying, nascent resolve. In the control room, the hum of machinery was a constant, vibrating presence. Her shift partner, Darnell, took one look at her and shook his head. "Kalen messing with your head again, ain't he?" "Everything's fine," she said, her voice flat. She took the shift log, her eyes scanning, but not reading. Her mind was elsewhere, in a future taking shape an ocean away. The days bled into one another, a strange pantomime of normal life played out over a crumbling stage. Kalen moved through the apartment with a new, almost jaunty confidence, his phone perpetually glued to his hand, his conversations with Zamara now conducted openly, full of plans and laughter. Bolua became quieter, more watchful. He clung to Nyara, his small hands finding hers more often, as if he could sense the tectonic plates shifting beneath his world. One afternoon, they sat at the kitchen table making sock snowmen for his school's holiday fair. They were using Kalen's old white socks, the ones he never wore. As Nyara carefully poured rice into the fabric, Olua looked at her, his brow furrowed with a concern far beyond his years. "Mama Nay, are you coming to the cabin with us? Dad says there's a huge hill for sledding." The hot glue gun hissed in the silence. Nyara focused on attaching a button, buying a fraction of a second. "No, honey, I'm not going." "Why?" Kalen chose that moment to walk in, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't stress the kid out," he said, ruffling Olua's hair without looking at Nyara. "Olu, Mommy Zamara is bringing you a new PlayStation. She promised." Olua's face lit up for a second, then fell again. "But Mama Nay, she's my mama too." Kalen's smirk vanished. "Of course she is," he said, his tone dismissive. "She's just going away for work. Adults do that sometimes. Work comes first." He shot Nyara a look that was both a warning and a dare. She said nothing. The argument wasn't here, not in front of Olua. The real battle, she was beginning to understand, would be fought in different arenas altogether. In the HR department at the mill, Mrs. Gable peered over her spectacles at the assignment papers. "China isn't exactly a weekend trip to Chicago, Nyara. You sure about this?" "I'm sure." Nyara's voice held no tremor. "How does the family feel about it?" "They're fine with it." The words tasted like ash, but they were, in Kalen's terms, true. He was more than fine. He was ecstatic. The morning of her departure arrived under a cloak of pre-dawn darkness. Kalen slept, turned towards the wall. Nyara did not wake him. In the kitchen, she packed the last of her things: charger, gum, a toothless first-grade photo of Olua tucked into her wallet. She was zipping her suitcase when a small, sleepy figure appeared in the doorway. "You're leaving already?" "Yes, baby. Come here." Olua shuffled over and pressed against her, a warm, trusting weight. "Mama Nay, will you come back?" "Of course I will." "Promise?" "I promise." A shadow fell across the doorway. Kalen, yawning. "What's all the noise? Olu, go back to sleep." "I want to say goodbye to Mama Nay." "No need." Kalen's hand descended on the boy's shoulder, turning him around. "Mommy Zamara is being here in an hour. We need to get ready." He looked at Nyara over the boy's head, his eyes cold. "Don't be so dramatic. You're just going to work. Big deal." Nyara picked up her suitcase. It felt impossibly light. She walked to the door. "Mama Nay!" Olua broke free and crashed into her, small arms wrapping tightly around her waist. "Bring me something from China, a dragon or some chopsticks." "I definitely will," she whispered into her hair. "All right, that's enough." Kalen pulled him back, his grip firm. "Good luck over there. Try not to do anything stupid." The door closed behind her with a sound of profound and utter finality. Shenzhen was a sensory explosion after Gary's muted winter palette. Heat, light, noise, a skyline of impossible towers. Her corporate apartment was a sterile box on the 23rd floor, a window onto a dazzling alien world. She sent messages to Olua every day. "How are you? What did you do today? I saw toy dragons." All delivered, none read. At a market, guided by her polite colleague Li Wei, she bought a small jade dragon, a protector of children, the vendor said through translation. Nyara wrapped it carefully, sending it off with a note filled with love, watching the tracking information crawl slowly across the world. One night, scrolling through Facebook in her lonely apartment, the past reached out and slapped her. A photo loaded. Kalen, Zamara, and Olua in front of a snow-covered cabin. They were wearing her gifts, his cashmere sweater, her hand-knitted scarf. Olua stood stiffly between them, his smile absent, his eyes looking anywhere but at the camera. "A real family New Year," the caption read, adorned with 3 hearts. The numbness that followed was deeper than any anger. It was the void of being erased. But then, methodically, she began to search. On the Lake County Clerk's Office website, she found it. Simmons versus Simmons, filed 5 days after her departure. The petition accused her of abandonment. It demanded sole possession of the house and repayment of family maintenance for her absence. Abandoned. The word pulsed on the screen, and with it, the calm, calculated rage finally arrived. It was cold, clear, and infinitely focused. This was no longer about a marriage. It was a war of attrition, and he had just fired the first treacherous shot. "Li Wei," she said the next day at the plant, her voice steady, "I need to go back to the States. A family emergency." She landed in Chicago armed not with emotion, but with evidence. The assignment letter, the dated emails, the bank statement showing Kaylin's attempt to drain their joint account the day after she left. She met with Sloan Robinson, a razor-sharp family law attorney and old friend, who whistled softly as she reviewed the file. "This isn't a divorce, Nayara. This is a hostile takeover in a family format. He thinks you're gone for good." The hearing was set for January 28th. Sloan advised calm, witnesses, facts. Nayara called Alua's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. "He's withdrawn," the teacher confided, her voice low with concern. "He said his dad told you went to China because money was more important than him." That was the moment the last vestige of anything soft in Nara's heart hardened into tempered steel. He wasn't just trying to erase her. He was poisoning the child she loved against her. The morning of the hearing, the Lake County Superior Court was a monument to anxiety, its halls smelling of damp wool and despair. Nara stood with Sloan, a folder of truth clutched in her hands. The door opened, and Kaylin smaggered in, 5 minutes late with a sleek lawyer in tow. He scanned the room for the defendant's empty chair, his face a canvas of anticipated victory. Then he saw her. His step faltered. Surprise, then panic, then fury flashed across his features before he composed himself into a mask of contempt. "Oh," he boomed, his voice echoing in the hushed room. "You showed up after all. The Chinese let you go?" The judge, a woman with a face carved by decades of familial discord, silenced him with a look. The hearing unfolded like a slow-motion unveiling of a crime. Nara presented her evidence with dispassionate clarity. The work assignment, the blocked messages, the bank fraud, the timeline of his deceit. Linda from the bank took the stand, describing Kaylin's scene in the lobby, his lies shouted for an audience. The judge's questions grew sharper, her tone withering. Kaylin squirmed, interjecting, accusing, digging his hole deeper with every outburst. When the judge issued her orders, freezing assets, mandating a home study, condemning his alienation of the child, Kaylin finally exploded, knocking over his chair. "She's not even his mother. She's nobody." His words echoed into a stunned silence, the truth of his character laid bare for the court to see. After the gavel fell, Nara was gathering her papers, her hands trembling not with fear, but with the aftermath of the clash, when she heard it. A small, cracking voice. "Mama!" She turned. Alua stood by a social worker, his backpack dwarfing him, his face pale and streaked with tears he'd clearly tried to hide. He broke free and ran, a small missile of need crashing into her so hard she stumbled back a step. He buried his face in her coat. "I knew you didn't leave me," he whispered, the words hot and damp against the wool. "I knew, Mama. Dad lied, but I knew." She held him, her own tears falling silently into his hair. The social worker approached, but Alua's grip was vice-like. "I'm not going," he stated, his voice muffled but fierce. "It's okay, baby," Nara soothed, stroking his head. "I'm not going anywhere. Talk to the lady. I'll wait right here, I promise." He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "Cross your heart?" "Cross my heart." The weeks that followed were a fragile reconstruction. Weekends with Alua in a temporary rental apartment, making pancakes and watching their traditional movies. He told her, in fits and starts, about the cabin, the forced cheer, Zamara's awkward attempts at motherhood that felt like a performance, Kaylin's constant simmering anger. "She's gone now," Alua said one morning, poking at his syrup. "After court, she told Dad he was a bad word. She said she didn't sign up for all this."
The ghost had fled, unable to withstand the reality of the mess she'd helped create. Kaylin's fury turned to desperation. He showed up at her apartment once, drunk and raging, blaming her for ruining his life, for stealing his son. But the fire was gone, replaced with a pathetic fear. "You can't steal a child," Nara told her quietly through the chain door. "You can only lose one, and you know that." He left, a deflated man facing the consequences of his own poisoned choices. The divorce, when it finalized, was a bureaucratic sigh, a 50-50 split of assets that felt meaningless. What mattered came 3 months later in a call from Kaylin. Alua was refusing to see him, was having nightmares, was a problem. Kaylin's voice was thick with resentment and relief. "Just take him, since he loves you so much." He signed the notarized consent for guardianship and international travel with an eagerness that was its own form of abandonment. A year later, Shenzhen welcomed them both. Alua, now 11, clutched her hand tightly in the airport, his eyes wide as saucers at the futuristic spectacle. "Mama, where are the dragons?" "Everywhere," she smiled. "Look closely." Li Wei met them, bowing slightly to Alua. "Welcome, young man." Their new apartment had 2 rooms. Alua pressed his face to the floor-to-ceiling window, breath fogging the glass. "Whoa! Mom, we're like in outer space." That night, after he succumbed to jet lag, Nara stood at the same window where she had once stood alone and shattered. The city was a galaxy of lights below. On the table nearby, the jade dragon kept watch beside a photo from a park back in Gary, a moment of simple, joyful laughter frozen in time. Her phone pinged. A message from her mother. "Did you land okay? How's the boy?" Nara typed her reply, her fingers sure and steady. "Everything's fine, Mom. We're home." And it was the truth. Home was no longer a place on a map, a town defined by steel mills and gossip. Home was the small, warm hand that had found hers in a crowded courtroom, the head that trusted her shoulder, the heart that knew the truth even when fed lies. It was the quiet, unbreakable bond forged not by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, by the daily, steadfast act of love. It was the peace that came not from a lack of storms, but from having weathered them together and found themselves, against all odds, still standing, still united. Somewhere in the neon-drenched night below, a rooftop sign in the shape of a dragon glowed with electric fire, a protector of children, watching over the city, watching them. The vendor, it seemed, had been right. The jade dragon sat on the low table in the living area, its cool, smooth surface seeming to absorb the neon glow from the cityscape beyond the window. Alua was asleep in his new room, exhausted by the journey and the overwhelming newness of everything. Nara remained by the window, the silence of the high-rise apartment a stark contrast to the constant, low-grade hum of Gary. It was a silence she was still learning to inhabit, one that didn't feel like absence, but like possibility. The peace, however, was a tenuous thing. It was built on legal documents and a father's surrender, not on resolution. Kaylin's signature on the guardianship papers felt less like a blessing and more like a lit fuse. He knew his resentment was too profound to simply dissipate. He had not fought for his son, but he had not relinquished his sense of ownership either. The court order was a piece of paper, and in her experience, men like Kaylin viewed such papers as obstacles to be circumvented, not laws to be obeyed. A week after their arrival, the first email arrived. It was to her personal account, the one she used for banking and utilities back home.
"Nara, I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. You always were a cold, calculating bitch. Just remember, he's still my son. On paper and in blood. You're just the babysitter, a paid nanny, and you're not even getting paid anymore. The house sold. I got my half. Don't come crawling back when that Chinese money runs dry. You made your bed. K." She deleted it without replying, a practiced habit from the later years of their marriage. Engaging was oxygen to his fire. But the words, cold, calculating bitch, echoed. They were the same words he'd hissed at her through the chain door. They were his refrain for a woman who dared to think, to plan, to defend herself. She closed the laptop and walked to Oluwa's door, pushing it open a crack. He was a lump under the comforter, one arm flung out, his breathing deep and even. Babysitter. The word was meant to wound, but as she watched her son sleep, it dissolved into meaningless noise. Life in Shenzhen began to assume a rhythm. Mornings were a hectic ballet of kanji and toast, of finding school uniforms and still unpacked boxes, and navigating the complex metro system to get Oluwa to the international school. His resilience was a marvel to her. After the initial shell shock, he approached China with the fearless curiosity of a child, peppering Li Wei with questions about characters and food, making tentative friends with a boy from Singapore in his class. Nara's work was demanding, the technical challenges of the plant a welcome distraction that required her full intellectual focus. Li Wei proved to be more than a colleague. He became a guide, patient and endlessly polite. He arranged a weekend trip to the Daffin oil painting village, where Oluwa was enthralled by artists reproducing masterpieces at dizzying speed. He helped Nara navigate the bewildering world of Taobao to find a specific brand of peanut butter Oluwa missed. He was a calm, steady presence in their abruptly uprooted lives. One evening, over hot pot, Li Wei spoke of his own daughter, living with his ex-wife in Beijing. "The heart does not understand geography or custody agreements," he said, swirling a slice of lamb in the bubbling broth. "It only knows who is there and who is not. Your doy, he knows who is there." It was after one such dinner, as Nara was checking Oluwa's homework at the kitchen counter, that her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize, but with a Gary area code. A cold trickle of apprehension traced her spine. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. A message left by a woman whose voice was strained with officious concern. "Ms. Simmons, this is Deborah Phelps from the Lake County Department of Child Services. I'm following up on a referral we've received regarding the welfare and international relocation of one Oluwa Simmons. We have some concerns we need to discuss with you. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." The air left Nara's lungs. The home study from the court hearing had been completed months ago, its findings benign, its case closed. This was new. A referral. She knew, with a certainty that felt like a physical blow, who had made it. She waited until Oluwa was in bed, the dragon clasped in his hand as he slept, before calling Sloane. "It's a harassment tactic, pure and simple. He can't touch you through the divorce anymore, so he's trying to weaponize the state. A concerned citizen report. Probably anonymous, but we all know the source. They have to follow up, but without any evidence of actual harm, it's just bureaucracy. I'll reach out to them, remind them of the court orders, the home study, the fact that the biological father consented to this relocation. It'll be a headache, but it's just paper." "It's a threat," Nara said quietly, looking out at the endless city lights. "It is," Sloane agreed, "and we treat it as such. Document everything. Save that voicemail. If he's starting a paper trail, we start a bigger one. Harassment, malicious use of public services, we can file a restraining order if this escalates." The call with the social worker, Miss Phelps, was an exercise in strained civility. Nara provided the case number from the home study, the notarized consent letter, Oluwa's enrollment records at the highly regarded international school, even photos of his bright, clean room. She offered to set up a video call so the social worker could see Oluwa herself. The woman's tone shifted from suspicious to vaguely apologetic. "We are required to investigate all referrals, Miss Simmons. This seems to be in order. We'll note the file." Nara hung up, her hand trembling. It wasn't the investigation that scared her. It was the intent behind it. Callan was signaling that he was still there, in the shadows, capable of injecting poison into their new life from 7,000 miles away. She decided not to tell Oluwa. He was just beginning to sleep through the night again, the shadows under his eyes fading.
But children are intuitive barometers of emotional pressure. He became clingier, asking repeatedly if she had to travel for work, if she was happy in China. One night, he woke from a nightmare, something vague about being lost in an airport where all the signs were in a language he couldn't read. She held him until dawn, singing the old lullabies she'd sung to him since he was 4. The next assault was more direct. It arrived on a Saturday morning, a video call request on her tablet from an unknown user. Oloa, sitting beside her eating cereal, saw the notification. "Who's that, Mom?" "Probably spam," she said, rejecting it. It immediately requested again. And again. A prickle of alarm ran through her. She handed her the remote. "Why don't you pick a movie? I'll be right back." She took the tablet into her bedroom. On the 4th attempt, against her better judgment, she accepted, keeping the camera covered. Callan's face filled the screen, blurry and pixelated. He was in a bar or a dimly lit room that resembled one. The background was a blur of wood paneling and neon beer signs. "There you are," he slurred, his voice too loud. "Finally decided to answer. Hiding out in your communist tower?" "What do you want, Callan?" Her voice was flat, devoid of the fear that was coiling in her stomach. "I want to see my son." He took a swig from a bottle. "You think you can just take him to the other side of the world? I have rights." "You signed those rights away. You told me to take him." "I was under duress," he shouted, the sound crackling through the speaker. "You and that bitch lawyer twisted everything. Put him on, or I swear to God, Nara." "You'll what? Called child services again? They've already investigated. They found nothing because there's nothing to find. You're drunk, Callan, and you're harassing me. This call is being recorded. If you contact me again, my lawyer will file for a restraining order that will make the last court order look like a welcome note. Do you understand?"
His face contorted with rage, a familiar, ugly mask. "You can't keep him from me forever." "You did that yourself," she said quietly and ended the call. She blocked the user, her hands shaking so badly she fumbled with the settings. She leaned against the wall, taking deep, deliberate breaths. The confrontation had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like she'd run a marathon. The audacity of it, the venom. It was a stark reminder that the past was not a closed book, but a live wire, still sparking. She composed herself before returning to the living room. Oluwa was engrossed in his movie. She sat beside him, pulling him close. He leaned into her without looking away from the screen. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked absently. "Everything's fine, baby," she said, resting her cheek on his head. She knew it wasn't. The peace they had was fragile, built on a fault line of Kalen's resentment. He was probing for weaknesses, and the video call felt like a test of her defenses. She reported the incident to Sloan, who was furious. "That's it. We're filing. International harassment. We'll serve him at his job. This stops now." The legal machinery grinded into motion again. The process was slower with an ocean between them, but Sloan was dogged. The temporary restraining order was granted, prohibiting Kaling from any direct or indirect contact with Nara or Oluwa. It felt like a flimsy shield, but it was a shield nonetheless. For a few weeks, the silence held. Nara began to hope that the legal warning had been enough. Oluwa thrived at school, joining a robotics club and coming home with excited chatter about gears and sensors. Nara's project at the plant was meeting its benchmarks, earning quiet respect from her Chinese counterparts. They found a rhythm. Weekend explorations of temples and markets, lazy Sundays with books and board games. The apartment started to feel less like a temporary pod and more like a home, filled with Oluwa's drawings taped to the walls and the comfortable clutter of their shared life. Then, the package arrived. It was left at the concierge desk of their apartment tower, a plain brown box with Oluwa's name typed on a label. There was no return address, but the postmark was smudged, unreadable. The concierge, a young man named Xiao Chen, handed it to Nara when she came home from work. "Here's for your son," he said with a smile. A deep foreboding settled over her. She took the box upstairs, her grip tight on the cardboard. It was light, too light. She set it on the table, staring at it as if it were a venomous creature. Oluwa was due home from a friend's house in an hour.
Her mind raced. It could be harmless, a belated gift from one of her colleagues, perhaps, but the typed label, the lack of a return address, the timing, it felt wrong. Her instincts, honed in the crucible of the last year, screamed a warning. She didn't open it. Instead, she took pictures of it from every angle, the label, the postmark. She called Sloan even though it was the middle of the night in Indiana. "Don't open it," Sloan said immediately, her voice thick with sleep but instantly alert. "Take it to the local authorities. Tell them you have a restraining order on an individual in the States and you fear this is a harassing communication. Let them open it. If it's benign, no harm. If it's not, you have an official report from Chinese police. That's a whole new level of evidence." It felt like an overreaction. It felt paranoid. But paranoia had kept her and Oluwa safe so far. She took the box to the local police station where Li Wei met her to help translate. The officers were polite but perplexed by her story. A family dispute an ocean away manifesting in a suspicious package in Shenzhen. Still, they took it seriously. They led her to an interview room, donned gloves, and opened it under the harsh fluorescent lights. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was not a bomb or a dead animal, but something somehow more sinister. It was a framed photograph. The photo was from Oluwa's last birthday party in Gary, the one before everything fell apart. In it, a smiling Kalin had his arm around a beaming Oluwa who was holding a slice of cake. Nara was cut out of the picture. Literally. Her image had been scissored from the frame, leaving a jagged, person-shaped hole in the group shot. On the glass, in what looked like red marker, was scrawled, "Real Family." A second item lay beneath it, a cheap plastic snow globe of the Chicago skyline. When one of the officers shook it, fake snow swirled around the tiny Sears Tower. Taped to the bottom was a note, typed, "Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget who his father is." Nara felt a cold nausea rise in her throat. It wasn't violent, but it was a violation, a calculated injection of poison into their new sanctuary. It was meant to frighten, to unsettle, to remind them that his reach, however pathetic, could still extend across the world. The police report took detailed statements. They photographed the items. They were clearly disturbed by the altered photograph. "This is psychological harassment," the senior officer said through Li Wei's translation. "It is a crime. We will file a report. If you can provide information on the suspected sender, we can pursue international channels." She provided Kalen's name, his last known address. It felt futile, but it was another brick in the wall of documentation Sloan was building. She returned to the apartment just as Li Wei was dropping Oluwa off from his playdate. Her son ran up, full of news about the video game they had been playing. She hugged him tightly, perhaps too tightly. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked, pulling back to look at her face. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just missed you." She managed to smile. "How about pizza for dinner?" She never told him about the box. That night, after he was asleep, she poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window. The city glittered, indifferent and immense. For the first time, the height of the apartment felt exposed, not secure. Kalen was a small, bitter man back in a crumbling Indiana town, but his malice was a persistent toxin. The restraining order was a line in the sand, and he just stomped right over it. The police report, combined with the video call evidence, gave Sloan the ammunition she needed. She filed a motion to have Kalen found in contempt of court for violating the restraining order. The hearing was scheduled, requiring Kalen to appear. Sloan's update email was succinct. He's furious. His lawyer is trying to get it dismissed, claiming no proof of sending the package. The postmark is a problem, but the content is unmistakably from him. The judge is not amused. Nara tried to compartmentalize, to focus on the small good moments, building a Lego set with Oluwa, mastering a few more phrases of Mandarin, the successful test run of her new process at the plant. But the undercurrent of anxiety was always there, a low hum in the background of her life. Then, the financial attack began.
It started with a declined card. She was buying groceries at the international market, a treat of imported cereal for Oluwa, when her debit card was refused. She used a credit card, confused. At home, she logged into her bank account. The login failed. A cold sweat broke out on her back. After multiple attempts, she called the bank's international helpline.
After a long hold and rigorous identity checks, the story came out. A report of suspicious activity had been placed on her primary account and credit cards. The activity flagged was a series of attempted online purchases from retailers in Shenzhen. High-value electronics, jewelry, all had been flagged and blocked by the bank's fraud department. The report had been called in by an authorized user on the account, Kalen Simmons. He still had the information. He still had the right, as a recently divorced co-signer on some of the older accounts, to report fraud. He had systematically tried to lock her out of her own finances, to strand her abroad. It took 3 days of frantic calls, faxing documents from the Chinese police and her employment contract to regain control. The bank, apologetic, explained that procedures had to be followed. Sloan, when informed, was livid. This is economic warfare. We're adding it to the contempt filing. He's systematically trying to destabilize you. The cumulative stress began to wear on Olua. He had another nightmare. He asked, out of the blue, if his dad was mad at him. Nara realized that children, even those not directly told, absorb the emotional weather of their homes. The barometric pressure in their apartment had been dropping for weeks. She made a decision. She couldn't live in a state of perpetual siege. She had left Gary to escape this. She had to find a way to end it, not just manage it. She asked Li Wei for a favor, not as a colleague, but as a friend. She explained the situation, the harassment, the fear. He listened, his expression grave. In China, he said finally, we have a saying, to scare the monkey, kill the chicken. You must make the consequence so certain, so severe, that he no longer sees the action as worth the risk. He believes he is untouchable in America. You must prove he is not. With Li Wei's help, she compiled a dossier. It contained everything: the court orders, the child services report, transcripts of the abusive emails recovered from her deleted folder, a log of the video call attempt, photos and the police report from the sinister package, and documentation of the financial sabotage. She wrote a cover letter, not as a pleading victim, but as a citizen and a mother reporting a sustained international campaign of harassment and intimidation. She addressed it to the Gary Police Department, the Lake County Prosecutor's Office, and the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Sloan helped ensure the language was legally precise and damning. It's a nuclear option, Sloan warned. If they decide to pursue it, even minimally, it could mean criminal charges for him. Stalking, cyber harassment, fraud. That's the point, Nara said, her voice steady. I've tried the shield. Now I need the sword. The packets were sent, registered mail, with copies to Sloan. Then they waited. The effect was not immediate, but it was seismic. 2 weeks later, Sloan called, her voice vibrating with a kind of grim triumph. They paid him a visit, the local police, to ask a few questions about the allegations. He lawyered up immediately, of course. But Nara, he was at work. They went to the plant. Everyone saw. Nara closed her eyes. In a town like Gary, where reputation was currency, being visited by police at your job was social annihilation. It was the one thing Kalen, with his fragile pride and carefully cultivated image, would fear most. His lawyer called me, Sloan said, suddenly very interested in a global settlement. He wants all legal actions dropped, on both sides. He's willing to sign a permanent, ironclad non-harassment order, relinquish any and all claims to communication with Olua until Olua is of age, and provide a notarized statement affirming that his consent for the relocation was voluntary and informed. In exchange, we don't press for criminal charges and we drop the contempt filing. What's the catch? Nara asked, her heart pounding. No catch. He's terrified. The prosecutor hasn't decided to file anything yet, but the investigation is open. He can't have that hanging over him. He's essentially surrendering, unconditionally. Nara walked to Oluwa's door. He was building a model spaceship, his tongue between his teeth in concentration. To scare the monkey, kill the chicken. Kalen wasn't dead, but his capacity to harm them was gutted. The price for his harassment was public shame and the looming threat of handcuffs. It was a price his vanity could not afford. "Tell him yes," Nara said, "but the agreement states that any future contact from him or anyone acting on his behalf results in the immediate forwarding of our entire dossier to the prosecutor for criminal filing. No warnings." "I'll draft it today," Sloan said. The documents arrived via courier a week later. Kalen's signature was there, slashed across the page with angry finality. Nara signed her own name with a hand that did not shake. She scanned the pages and sent them to the Gary police detective who had contacted Sloan, as a courtesy. The silence that followed this time was different. It was not the fragile quiet of a temporary ceasefire, but the deep, enduring silence of a war that had truly ended. The threat, the constant gnawing anxiety, dissolved. It was as if a deafening noise she had grown so accustomed to that she no longer consciously heard it had suddenly been switched off. The relief was physical, a lightness in her bones. That weekend, she took Olua to the Shenzhen Bay Park. They flew a dragon kite she had bought him, its long, colorful tail whipping in the salty breeze coming off the water. He ran across the grass, laughing, the string taut in his hands, the kite soaring high against the vast blue sky. Nara watched him, the sun warm on her face. She thought of her father's words, the ones that had looped in her head during the darkest times. "Never let anyone treat you like you're just lucky to be standing next to them." She hadn't just stood, she had fought. She had crossed an ocean, she had built a new life from the ashes of the old, and she had protected her son. Olua ran back to her, breathless, his cheeks flushed. "Did you see it, Mom? It went so high." "I saw," she said, pulling him into a one-armed hug, her eyes still on the kite, a speck of brilliant color dancing on the wind. It was free. They were free. The past was not forgotten, it was a scar, a story, but it no longer held the power to dictate the present or to shadow the future. The dragon on the table at home was no longer just a symbol of protection from external harm. It had become a testament to their own resilience, a small, carved piece of the fierce, unbreakable love that had carried them through the storm and into the clear, open sky. The clear, open sky proved to be more than just a metaphor. With the legal threats extinguished, the air in their Shenzhen apartment truly seemed to lighten, the humid breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine through the balcony doors instead of the old familiar scent of dread.
Oluwa's nightmares ceased. The watchful tension in his shoulders, a subtle hunch Nara had become achingly attuned to, melted away. He threw himself into his new world with the unself-conscious zeal of an 11-year-old, his Mandarin progressing in clumsy, enthusiastic bursts, his friendship with the boy from Singapore, Anil, becoming the cornerstone of his social life. Nara's work flourished. Without the constant, draining background hum of anxiety, her focus sharpened. The process optimization she was consulting on at the plant yielded results that impressed her Chinese counterparts and earned a formal commendation from the joint venture board. Li Wei, over a celebratory dinner of delicate dim sum, raised his teacup. "To clarity of purpose," he said, his eyes kind, "it is the most powerful tool an engineer, or a mother, can possess." She clinked her cup against his, a genuine smile on her face. The friendship with Li Wei was a quiet, steadying pleasure. It was devoid of the frantic intensity or emotional manipulation that had characterized her relationship with Kalin. It was based on mutual respect, shared professional challenges, and a fondness for Olua that Li Wei demonstrated by remembering his fascination with robotics and bringing him small, intricate components from the plant's scrap bin. One Saturday, Li Wei took them to the ancient fishing village of Dachong, a preserved relic of old Shenzhen amidst the soaring glass towers. Wandering the narrow stone alleys, Olua darted ahead, pointing at carvings of fish and dragons on the temple eaves. Li Wei walked beside Nara, his hands clasped behind his back.
"You seem settled," he observed. "I feel it," I admitted, "for the first time in a very long time. It's strange. The peace feels like something I have to learn how to hold, like a new piece of equipment." "It is not the peace that is fragile," he said gently. "You are not fragile. You have proven this. The peace is simply the absence of the storm you were forced to navigate. Now you can choose your own weather." His words lingered with her. Choose your own weather. For so long, her emotional climate had been dictated by Kalin's temper, his whims, his betrayals. Now, the forecast was hers to write. She began to write it in small, deliberate ways. She enrolled in a weekend calligraphy class, not because she had any great talent, but because she loved the meditative focus of the brushstrokes, the slow creation of beauty from ink and paper. She and Oluwa adopted a ritual of Sunday adventures, using the metro map like a treasure chart to explore a new park, museum, or market each week. They ate sticky mango rice from street vendors, got hopelessly lost in the sprawling Luohu commercial city, and laughed until they cried trying to master chopsticks with slippery wontons. The past, while no longer a threat, was not entirely forgotten. It surfaced sometimes in quiet moments. Olua, helping her fold laundry, might hold up one of his old T-shirts from Gary, emblazoned with the logo of a sports team he no longer followed. "Remember when Dad took me to that game?" he'd say, not with sadness, but with the simple, factual curiosity, as if recalling a character from a book he'd read long ago. "I remember," Nara would say, and she'd wait, letting him guide the memory. "He spilled his beer when they scored," Olua would chuckle, and that would be that. The memory was stripped of its emotional charge, becoming just a story, a pixel in the larger, more vibrant picture of his present. Nara herself had her own echoes. Sometimes the sight of a couple arguing in a market, the man's voice rising in that particular entitled way, would send a jolt of old fear through her. But it would pass quickly, replaced by a surge of gratitude for the quiet in her own life. She kept the dossier, the one she'd sent to the authorities, in a digital folder, not out of lingering fear, but as a record of her own strength, a receipt for survival. A year bled into 18 months. Olua turned 12. His birthday party was a raucous affair with a dozen international school friends crammed into their apartment, a cacophony of English, Mandarin, and Hindi echoing off the walls as they battled in a video game tournament. Nara watched from the kitchen, a knot of pure, unadulterated joy in her chest. This was her life, this noisy, messy, multicultural life she had built. It was shortly after the birthday that an email arrived from Sloan. It was not about Kalin. It was about Zamara. "Nara, you're not going to believe this. Zamara reached out to me. She's been for rehab, got her life together, apparently. She's working as a dental hygienist in Indianapolis. She didn't ask for anything legal. She asked if I could pass along a request. She would like, if you are willing and if it is not disruptive, to write a letter to Olua. She says she has no right to expect a reply or even for him to read it. She just wants to apologize to him and to you. She says she finally understands what she walked away from and what she allowed herself to be used for. She says she lives with the regret every day. I told her I would ask you with no promises. The ball is entirely in your court. Let me know." Nara read the email 3 times. Zamara, the ghost, the real mother, the weapon Kalin had used to try to break her. Now she was just a woman in Indianapolis, clean and sober, seeking a form of penance. The old anger was gone, burned away in the crucible of the last 2 years. What remained was a complicated pity and a fierce protectiveness over Oluwa's hard-won peace. She thought about it for a week. She discussed it with Li Wei, who listened and then said, "The letter is not for the boy, it is for her. But receiving it or not receiving it is for him. You are his mother. You must decide what is a burden and what is a gift." Finally, she wrote back to Sloan, "Tell her she can send the letter to you. I will read it first. Then I will decide whether to give it to Olua. That is the only offer. The letter arrived a month later, forwarded by Sloane. It was handwritten on simple stationery, the writing careful, almost childish in its neatness. Dear Olua, you probably don't remember me. My name is Zamara. I am the woman who gave birth to you. I am writing this letter to say I am sorry. I am more sorry than any words in this letter can ever express. When you were little, I was very sick, not in my body, but in my mind and my heart. I was selfish and scared, and I made the worst choice a person can make. I left you. There is no excuse for that, none. I have spent years trying to forgive myself, and I am not sure I ever will. I want you to know that leaving had nothing to do with you. You were a beautiful, perfect baby. The problem was always with me. I heard about what happened later with your dad and with Nara. I let myself be used to hurt you and the woman who loved you when I did not. For that, I am doubly ashamed.
I am sober now. I have been for 467 days. I go to meetings. I have a job where I help people. I am trying to be a person who would never make those choices again. I am telling you this not to make you feel sorry for me, but so you know that the person who left you is gone. I am trying to be someone better. I do not expect you to write back. I do not expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I just needed you to hear, from me, that I am sorry, that I think about you every single day, and I hope with all my heart that you are happy. I hope you are loved. I know you are, because Nora is your mother in every way that counts. She fought for you when I ran away. You are a very lucky boy to have her. If someday, when you are much older, you ever have any questions for me, Sloane knows how to reach me. But if you never want to think of me again, that is your right, and I will understand. I am so very sorry. Zamara. Nara cried when she read it. They were not tears of anger or even of grief, but of a profound, weary sadness for all the broken roads that had led them to this point. The letter was raw, painfully honest, and devoid of manipulation. It was, as Leeway predicted, clearly for Zamara's own healing. But it also held a quiet dignity, an acceptance of consequence that Kaylin had never been capable of. She waited another week. She observed Olua. He was in a good place, confident at school, excited about an upcoming robotics competition, securely anchored in their life. One evening after homework, she sat beside him on the couch. "Honey, I have something to talk to you about. It's a little serious." He put down his tablet, immediately attentive. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I received a letter. It's from Zamara." His brow furrowed. The one who... "Yes, she wrote it to you. I read it first. She wanted to apologize, to tell you she's sorry for leaving and for the part she played in the trouble after. She's gotten help. She's doing better." Olua was quiet for a long time, looking at his hands. "What does she want?" "Nothing. She doesn't expect a reply. She just wanted you to hear the apology from her. I have the letter. You can read it, or not. You can throw it away, or keep it. It's entirely up to you. I will support whatever you decide." He thought for another minute. "Can I read it later? Like, not now?" "Of course. Whenever or never. It's your choice." She handed him the sealed envelope. He took it, holding it carefully, as if it were something delicate or potentially dangerous. He didn't open it. He just took it to his room and put it in his dress drawer. 3 days passed. He didn't mention it. Then, on the 4th day, after school, he came into the kitchen where Nara was cooking. "I read it," he said simply. She turned off the stove. "Okay." "It was... sad." He leaned against the counter. "I don't really remember her. It's like she's apologizing to a stranger. But I'm glad she's not sick anymore." "Me too," Nara said softly. "I don't think I want to write back. Is that mean?" "No, baby, it's not mean at all. It's honest. You don't owe her anything." He nodded, seeming relieved. "Can we have dumplings for dinner?" And that was that. The ghost had finally spoken, and in doing so, had lost the last of its haunting power.
For Alua, she was a figure from a sad story, now with a slightly less sad ending. For Nara, she was a reminder of the winding, painful paths that sometimes lead people away from the ones they should love, and of the miraculous, ferocious grace of second chances. Not for Zamara with Alua, but for herself, with this life she had reclaimed. The seasons turned in Shenzhen, marked not by snow and falling leaves, but by the intensity of the heat and the occasional typhoon warning. Nara's initial contract was extended, then made permanent. They moved to a slightly larger apartment in the same tower, with a room that could be a study for her and a guest room for when her mother, who had finally conquered her fear of the long flight, came to visit. On one of those visits, Nara's mother, Beatrice, a sturdy woman with Nara's same steady eyes, stood at the window overlooking the city. Alua was showing him his latest robot, a spidery thing that could navigate a maze. Beatrice watched Alua, then turned to Nara. "I was so worried when you left," she said, her voice low. "I thought he'd broken you for good. But look at you. Look at him. You didn't just survive it, baby. You made it into fertilizer. You grew something stronger." It was the highest praise her mother could give. When Alua was 14, a notification popped up on Nara's phone, a friend request on a professional networking site. The name was Kaylin Simmons. The profile showed a generic silhouette. She stared at it, her breath catching for a second in an old, conditioned reflex. Then she exhaled, a slow, deliberate release. She felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no curiosity. It was a notification from a stranger. She tapped ignore and closed the app. The weather in her world remained unchosen by him. It remained hers. That evening, she and Alua, now tall and lanky with a voice that dipped unexpectedly into lower registers, were walking through the night market, weaving through crowds under strings of colorful lights. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling pork, incense, and durian. Alua was debating between bubble tea flavors. "What do you think, Mom? Taro or matcha?" "You're the adventurous one," she laughed. "Surprise me." As he went to order, her phone buzzed. A message from Li Wei. "Dinner next Friday? There is a new Hunan place I think you will like. I have some news." She smiled, typing a quick affirmative. She looked up to see Alua returning with 2 cups, a look of triumph on his face. "Got you the matcha. I went taro. Live dangerously." She took the cup, the condensation cool against her fingers. As they walked, sipping their drinks, he slipped his free hand in the crook of her arm, a habit left over from childhood that he hadn't grown out of. They walked in comfortable silence, part of the river of people, anonymous and yet completely at home. The past was a country she no longer lived in. Its borders were closed, its landscapes faded to old photographs. The present was this: the sweet, grassy taste of matcha, the warm weight of her son's hand on her arm, the dazzling labyrinth of lights, the promise of a friend's news, the vast, starless sky of a city that had become their own. She had crossed an ocean to escape a prison, and in doing so, had not just found freedom, but had built a kingdom. And in the heart of that kingdom, there was no room for ghosts, only for life. Loud, messy, fragrant, and fiercely, unconditionally their own. The story wasn't about an ending, because it wasn't over. It was about a continuous, chosen beginning written in the language of resilience. One peaceful, ordinary, extraordinary day at a time.